Story. Real story of calm bursting in Swat, Pakistan. Section 1. The calm before the storm. The Valley of Swat has always been called the Switzerland of the East. Surrounded by towering peaks, carpeted with lush greenery, and blessed with rivers that sang like silver threads, it seemed almost untouched by time. The people of Swat carried on their lives in harmony with nature. Farmers plowed their small fields, women carried baskets of fruits and vegetables to the markets, and children's laughter echoed along narrow mud streets. It was a place where the rhythm of life was slow, peaceful, and deeply rooted in tradition. On one particular afternoon, the sun hid behind drifting clouds. The air was unusually heavy, a kind of suffocating stillness that made even the birds restless. Goats bleated nervously in their pens, and cattle moved in circles as if disturbed by something invisible. The elders of the village, sitting outside a tea stall, looked up at the sky and exchanged silent glances. "Strange weather," one of them muttered, stroking his white beard. "It is too early for such darkness." But no one truly worried. Rain was common in Swat, and storms, though fierce, usually passed quickly. In one corner of the village lived Raymond, a farmer with calloused hands and kind eyes. He was preparing his field for the next crop season, his wife, Zainab, busy grinding wheat inside their modest home. Their two children, Aisha and Hamza, chased each other outside, their laughter competing with the rustle of trees in the wind. Raymond's elderly mother sat on a woven cot, prayer beads slipping through her fingers as she watched the skies with unease. The clouds thickened. What was once a gentle gray had turned into a heavy blanket of black. A sudden gust of wind swept through the village, rattling wooden shutters and slamming doors. Dust rose in spirals, forcing children to cover their faces. Aisha ran to her grandmother, clutching her hand. "Is it going to rain, Dottie?" she asked with innocent curiosity. The old woman forced a smile, though her eyes lingered on the sky longer than usual. By evening, the first drops of rain began to fall, slow, hesitant, and cold. Raymond stepped out to secure the tools in his field, muttering, "Just another storm, it will pass." But the raindrops soon multiplied, striking the earth with unusual force. Within minutes, puddles formed on the dirt roads, and the sound of rain drumming on rooftops grew louder, like an approaching army. Children were hurried inside, lanterns were lit, and prayers whispered. No one in the village yet understood what was coming. They thought it was just another passing storm, one of many that had graced the valley. Yet there was something unnatural about the way the rain fell that evening, relentless, heavy, and filled with an unspoken warning. And then, in the distance, a low rumble echoed through the mountains. Not the ordinary thunder that fades into silence, but a rolling growl that seemed to shake the earth itself. The storm had only just begun. Section 2. The Wrath of the Sky. The rain, which had begun as a steady rhythm, soon transformed into a furious downpour. It was as if the heavens had opened all at once, unleashing every drop they held in a single torrent. Sheets of water lashed against the earth, blurring the line between sky and ground. The villagers, who had first sought shelter with calmness, now began to exchange anxious glances. This was no ordinary storm. Within minutes, narrow streams that usually flowed gently through the valley swelled into violent rivers. Water rushed through streets, tearing away wooden carts, straw roofs, and anything that stood in its path. The peaceful melody of rainfall had been replaced by a terrifying roar, louder than anything the villagers had ever heard. Raymond clung to the doorframe of his home, shouting over the thunder to his wife. "Zainab, gather the children, quickly." She held Aisha and Hamza tightly, wrapping them in a shawl, her own hands trembling. His mother clutched her prayer beads, whispering verses as if her words could hold back the sky. The ground shook with the force of the storm. Thunder boomed like cannon fire, each strike reverberating through the mountains. The villagers ran in every direction, desperate for higher ground. Men tried to lead their animals to safety, but terrified goats and cows slipped and drowned in the raging water. Women screamed for their children, while children cried for their parents, their voices lost in the roar of the storm. The water climbed higher, flooding homes in a matter of minutes. Mud walls collapsed, wooden beams cracked, and entire houses were swept away as if they were made of paper. A neighbor shouted from the next house, "Run! The river is coming." His warning was swallowed by the furious current that broke through, carrying logs, boulders, and fragments of lives that had been built over generations. Raymond tried to lead his family uphill toward a cluster of rocks that offered safety. But in the chaos, Hamza's small hand slipped from his father's grasp. The boy was pushed back by the current, his tiny frame stumbling in the water. "Hamza!" Zainab screamed, her voice breaking with terror. Raymond lunged forward, grabbing his son's arm just as the current threatened to pull him under. He held him close, his heart pounding in fear and relief. The night grew darker. The rain was relentless, unceasing, falling with a rage that defied reason. The villagers huddled together wherever they could, shivering in the cold, their eyes wide with terror as they watched their homes crumble and wash away. Every thunderclap reminded them of their helplessness. Every flash of lightning revealed more destruction. Hours felt like centuries. The once familiar valley was now unrecognizable, a raging sea of water, mud, and debris. Families were separated, neighbors disappeared in the flood, and cries of anguish rose into the stormy night. The people of Swat had always respected the mountains, the rivers, and the skies above. But that night, they learned what it meant when nature turned its face in fury. The storm showed no mercy, and the valley that had once been their safe haven had become a prison of water. And in the heart of that chaos, one family, like so many others, clung desperately to each other, praying to survive the wrath of the sky. Section 3. Real story of calm bursting in Swat, Pakistan. The storm raged through the night. Section 1. Pounding the valley before the merciless force. The valley of Swat has always been called the Switzerland against the rising waters, surrounded by towering peaks, drowned by the carpeted with lush greenery, and by dawn, with rivers that the rain had like silver threads. But the devastation it left behind was beyond imagination. The people of Swat carried on their lives in harmony with nature, swallowed farmers by torrents their small of muddy water. Women carried baskets of fruits and vegetables to the bridges lay in ruins, and children scattered like broken toys across the landscape. It was a place stood on a rocky slope with his wife and son clinging to him, and deeply rooted in tradition. Soaked on one particular afternoon, but Aisha, the sun hid behind drifting clouds. In the confusion of the night, the air was unusually heavy, Zainab's grip, a kind of suffocating stillness that made even Zainab's face was pale. Her eyes bleated nervously in their pens. "My daughter, my Aisha," in circles, she whispered over and over, something invisible, her voice cracking. The elders of the village, heart clenched sitting outside a tea stall, he looked up himself to stay strong and exchanged silent glances. He promised, "Strange weather, fear not." One of them muttered. Across the valley, his white beard, other families faced the same grief. It is too early for such darkness. Children wandered barefoot, but no one truly worried. For parents who never answered. Rain was common in Swat. Women searched the banks of the swollen river, usually to see a familiar face. In one corner of the village lived Raymond. Old men sat in silence, a farmer with calloused staring blankly at the wreckage of the homes they had built. He was preparing his field for the next crop season. The flood had not only taken lives, but also busy grinding wheat inside, leaving despair in its wake. Their two children, amid the ruin, Aisha and Hamza, chased each other young men tied ropes to trees, their laughter competing forming with the makeshift lines to pull people across flooded Raymond's stretches. Elderly mother sat on a woven cot, little food remained, beads slipping dried bread to hungry children. The skies with a boy climbed onto the roof of a broken shop and extended his hand. A gentle gray stranded in the current into a risking his life of black to save hers. A sudden gust of wind swept through the village. People of Swat began rattling wooden shutters and slamming doors. Raymond searched tirelessly for Aisha, calling her name through the wreckage to cover their faces. At last, Aisha ran to her grandmother. He had seen a group of children sheltered. "Is it going to rain, Dottie?" she asked with innocent curiosity. With renewed hope, the old woman and Zainab rushed there, though her eyes lingered on the sky longer than usual. And there, by evening, huddled among the first drops of rain began to fall. Aisha, slow, her face lit up when she saw her parents. Raymond stepped out to secure the tools into her mother's arms, muttering. Zainab wept uncontrollably, holding her daughter as if the raindrops soon multiplied. But survival was far from unusual force. The rain had stopped within minutes, yet hunger, puddles formed on the dirt roads, fear now set in. And the sound of rain drumming on rooftops contaminated wells, like
an
food
approaching
supplies
army.
were washed away.
Children were
Children
hurried
shivered
inside.
in wet clothes.
Lanterns were lit,
and the sick
and
grew
prayers
weaker.
whispered.
Rescue teams
No one
were
in the
still
village
days away,
yet understood
leaving the
what was
villagers
coming.
to rely
They
only
thought
on
it
one
was
another.
just another
That
passing
night,
storm.
Families
many
gathered
that had
around
graced
small
the
fires
valley.
made from damp
Yet there
wood.
was something
The smoke stinging
unnatural
their
about the way
eyes,
the rain
but
fell
giving
that
them
evening.
warmth.
Despite
Relentless,
exhaustion,
heavy,
the people
and
prayed
filled
aloud,
with an unspoken
their
warning.
voices trembling
And then,
but united.
in the distance,
They had endured the
a
fury
low
of the
rumble
sky,
echoed
and
through
now
the
they
mountains.
clung to the hope
Not
that
the
tomorrow would
ordinary
bring
thunder
help,
that fades
light,
into silence,
and perhaps
but
a chance
a
to
rolling
rebuild.
growl that seemed
The
to
valley
shake
was
the earth
broken,
itself.
but the
Spirit
storm
of
had
its
only
people
just
refused
begun.
to be defeated.
Section
4:
The wrath
Rebuilding
of the sky.
from ruins.
The rain,
When the
which
storm
had begun
finally
as a
passed,
steady rhythm,
silence
soon
returned to the
transformed
valley.
into a furious
But it was not
downpour.
the gentle silence
It was
of
as if the
Swat that
heavens had
villagers
opened
once
all at
knew.
once.
It was heavy,
unleashing every
broken,
drop they held
and
in a
filled
single
with sorrow.
torrent.
The
Sheets
air's
of
smell
water
of
lashed
earth
against
and
the
loss,
earth,
where
blurring
there
the
had
line
once
between
been green
sky
fields
and ground.
and blooming orchards.
The villagers,
now there
who
was
had
first
only
sought
mud,
shelter with
twisted
calmness,
wood, and shattered
now
stone.
began to exchange
The mighty
anxious
rivers
glances.
had calmed, but
This
they
was
carried
no
with them
ordinary
pieces
storm.
of lives.
Within
Clothes,
minutes,
furniture,
narrow streams
and
that
even
usually
entire
flowed
rooftops
gently through
through
the valley
by the
swelled
flood.
into violent
As dawn
rivers.
broke,
Water
survivors
rushed through
began
streets,
to emerge
tearing
from the
away wooden
hillsides
carts
and rocky
straw
ledges
roofs,
where they had taken
and
shelter.
anything that stood
They
in
looked
its
around
path.
in disbelief.
The peaceful melody
their
of
eyes
rainfall
searching
had been
for
replaced
familiar
by a
paths that
terrifying
no
roar,
longer existed,
louder than
Raymond
anything
held
Zainab's
Zainab's hand
hand
had ever heard.
With Aisha
Raymond
and
clung
Hamza
to the
pressed
door
close
frame
to
of his
them,
home,
while his mother
shouting
leaned
over
on
the
his
thunder
shoulder
to
for
his
support.
wife.
They
Zainab
had survived,
gathered
but
the
their
children
home was gone.
quickly.
She
Reduced
held
to rubble
Aisha
beneath
and
the flood.
Hamza tightly.
Neighbors
wrapping
gathered
them
together,
in a shawl,
counting
her
the
own
living
hands
and mourning the
trembling.
lost.
His mother
Some
clutched her
families
prayer
were
beads,
broken forever,
whispering
while
verses
others
as
rejoiced
if her
at
words could
tearful
hold back the
reunions.
sky. A
The
mother
ground
wailed for
shook
her
with the
missing
force
son,
of the storm.
her cries
Thunder
echoing through the
boomed
valley,
like cannon
while
fire.
a father dug
Each
through the
strike
debris with bare
reverberating
hands,
through the mountains,
hoping to find
the
something,
villagers ran in
anything,
every direction
that belonged to the
desperate
life
for higher
he had
ground.
once known.
Men
And
tried
yet,
to lead their animals
amid the
to
grief,
safety, but
seeds of
terrified
hope began
goats
to
and cows
appear.
slipped.
The
and
villagers
drowned in
shared
the
what
raging
little
water.
remained.
Women
A bundle of
for
dry
their
bread
children,
passed from
while
hand
children
to hand.
cried for their
A
parents.
blanket spread
Their
over
voices
shivering
lost
children.
in the roar
A whispered
of the storm.
prayer spoken
The
for
water
all.
climbed
Those
higher.
who had lost
Flooding
everything were
homes in a matter
sheltered
of
by
minutes.
those who still had a
Mud
roof.
walls collapsed.
In tragedy,
Wooden
the
beams
people of
cracked,
Swat became
and
one
entire
family.
houses were
Days
swept
later,
away as if they
rescue
were made of
teams
paper.
and volunteers
And neighbors
finally
shouted
reached
from
the
the
next
next
house,
bringing
food,
"Run,
medicine,
the river
and
is
comfort.
coming."
His
Their
warning
arrival
was
brought
swallowed
relief,
by the furious
but the
current
true
that broke
strength
through,
had already been
carrying
shown by the
logs,
villagers
boulders,
themselves.
and fragments of
They had
lives
endured
that had
the
been
long
built
nights
over
without
generations.
relying
Raymond tried
only
to
on
lead
their
his family
faith,
uphill toward a
courage,
cluster of
and
rocks
unity.
that offered safety.
Slowly, but in the
Life
chaos,
began to stir again.
Hamza's small
Men
hand
cleared
slipped from his
debris from
father's
his
grasp.
grasp.
Women
The boy
rebuilt
was pushed back
kitchens
by
with
the
whatever
current,
scraps of
his
wood they could
tiny
find,
frame stumbling
and
in the
children,
water.
despite
Hamza,
the fear still in
Zainab
their
screamed,
eyes,
her
found
voice
moments to
breaking
laugh
with
and
terror.
play.
Raymond
lunged
stood
forward,
with other men,
grabbing his
planning
son's
how
arm
to
just
restore
as
the
the
irrigation
current threatened
channels.
to pull him under.
"We will rebuild."
He held him close,
he said firmly,
his heart
his
pounding
voice
in
carrying
fear
conviction.
and relief.
This
The
valley
night
is
grew
our home.
darker.
The
The
storm
rain
has
was
taken
relentless,
much, but
unceasing,
it cannot take our spirit.
falling with a rage
One
that
evening,
defied reason.
as the sun set
the
over
villagers
the scarred
huddled
mountains,
together wherever they
Zainab
could,
watched her children
shivering
playing
in the cold,
near the riverbank,
their eyes
the
wide
water
with
flowed
terror
quietly
as they watched
again,
their homes
as if
crumble
nothing had
and
happened.
wash away.
Tears welled
Every
in her
thunderclap
eyes,
reminded
but this
them
time
of their
they were not
helplessness.
only of sorrow.
Every flash
They were
of lightning
also
revealed
gratitude.
more destruction.
Her family was
Hours
alive,
felt
and
like that was
centuries.
enough to begin again.
The once familiar
valley
Swat
was
would
now
carry the scars of the
unrecognizable,
Cloudburst for
a
years,
raging sea of
but
water,
its people had learned
mud,
a profound
and
truth.
debris.
Families
Nature's
were
power is
separated.
fierce.
Neighbors
But human
disappeared in the
resilience is
flood,
fiercer.
and cries
From the
of
ruins
anguish
of
rose
destruction
into the stormy
they
night.
found unity.
The people of Swat had
courage, and
always
hope.
respected the mountains,
And so,
the rivers,
the story
and
of the
skies
Cloudburst
above.
was not
But
only
that
about
night,
loss,
they
but
learned
also
what it
about
meant
survival.
when nature turned
a
its face
reminder
in
that
fury.
even when the
The
sky
storm
shows its
showed
wrath,
no mercy,
the human
and the
heart
valley that
can
had
shine
once been their
brighter
safe
than
haven
any storm.
had become a prison of
Immortal.
water.
And
the
in the
story
heart of
teaches
that
us
chaos,
that nature is
one
both
family,
a giver of
like
life
so many
and
others,
a force of
clung
destruction.
desperately to each
We
other.
must respect respect
praying
its
to
power
survive the
and
wrath of the
prepare
sky.
for its unpredictability. Disasters may break our homes, but unity, courage, and compassion help us survive and rebuild. In times of darkness, it is human resilience and togetherness that light the path forward.